My name is Haley Mitchell, and I turned 24 last Tuesday while working a 12-hour shift at Memorial Hospital. I'd been a registered nurse for almost 2 years, and the Toyota Corolla parked in the staff lot was my pride and joy, the first car I'd ever bought with my own money. During my lunch break, my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. "We sold your car for $8,000. Jake needs tuition money. Family comes first. Be grateful we raised you right." My hands started shaking so badly I dropped my sandwich. They couldn't have. They wouldn't have. But they did. Before I dive into how my parents sold my car without permission and how I finally stood up for myself, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever had family take advantage of your kindness, and subscribe to join me on this journey of setting boundaries and reclaiming my life. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant one thing above all else. What my parents wanted always came first. My father, Frank, a loan officer at the local bank with an inflated sense of authority, and my mother, Diane, a part-time receptionist who weaponized guilt like an Olympic sport, controlled every aspect of my childhood and adolescence. My wardrobe, my friends, my hobbies, all subject to their approval. My younger brother Jake, now 20, and sister Melissa, 18, never seemed to face the same scrutiny or demands. "Haley, you're the oldest. You need to set an example," became the soundtrack of my youth, playing on repeat whenever I questioned their decisions or expressed a desire for independence. When I wanted to join the volleyball team in high school, I couldn't because I needed to babysit my siblings. When I received a partial scholarship to my dream university across the state, I was firmly directed toward the local community college because family stays together. The pattern was painfully predictable. Jake wanted a gaming computer. Dad worked overtime to buy it. Melissa needed dance lessons. Mom rearranged the entire family schedule to accommodate. But when I needed anything, the response was always, "We'll see," which everyone in the family knew translated to absolutely not. Despite these constraints, I managed to complete my nursing degree, working multiple jobs to cover the costs my parents couldn't or wouldn't help with. My classmate Amy often found me studying in the campus library at midnight after finishing an 8-hour shift at the local diner. "I don't know how you do it," she'd say, sliding an extra coffee my way. The truth was, neither did I. But the promise of independence kept me going through the all-nighters and double shifts. When I graduated and secured a position at Memorial Hospital with a starting salary that exceeded anything my parents had ever earned, I felt a surge of pride that was quickly tempered by their reaction. "It's about time you started contributing more to the household," my father commented when I shared the news. No congratulations. No celebration. Just an expectation that my achievement would benefit them. For 3 years, I lived at home and saved every penny I could, quietly plotting my escape while enduring daily reminders that I owed them for raising me. My paychecks regularly disappeared into the family fund for emergencies that somehow always aligned with Jake's wants or Melissa's needs. The day I bought my Toyota Corolla was the first time I'd ever directly defied them. I'd been eyeing the used car for weeks. A 2015 model with reasonable mileage and a price tag of $12,000 that I could actually afford thanks to my secret savings account. When I drove it home, my father's face darkened with a storm of disapproval. "You spent your money on this?" Without consulting us, he demanded, as if I'd committed an unforgivable betrayal. "I'm 23, Dad. I need reliable transportation for work," I replied, clutching the keys tightly in my palm, already anticipating his attempt to take them. My mother's approach was more insidious. "I thought we raised you to think about others before yourself. Your brother's college tuition is coming due, and now you've wasted money on this." It wasn't wasted money. It was my freedom. For the first time, I could come and go without borrowing the family car or explaining my whereabouts. I could take extra shifts without coordinating transportation. I could even, though I barely allowed myself to think it, start looking for my own apartment. In the 6 months since purchasing my car, my parents' financial demands had intensified. My father's position at the bank had become precarious due to downsizing, and he'd made several poor investment decisions that he kept hidden from everyone except me, his designated confidant for troubles, but never for triumphs. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he'd say whenever I questioned the increasing requests for loans that we both knew would never be repaid. When you have a family of your own, you'll realize that sometimes difficult decisions must be made. The irony that I was funding these difficult decisions while being told I wouldn't understand them wasn't lost on me. As my birthday approached, I volunteered for a double shift at the hospital, partly for the overtime pay and partly to avoid another disappointing family celebration, where my mother would prepare my brother's favorite meal instead of mine, and my father would give a toast that somehow centered on his own achievements. My real celebration would come the following weekend, when my friends had planned a small gathering at Tyler's apartment. Tyler, a paramedic I'd met during my hospital orientation, had become one of my closest friends and strongest supporters. "You deserve one day that's actually about you," he insisted when proposing the party. The concept was so foreign it almost made me uncomfortable. The morning of my birthday, I left for work before anyone else was awake. No cards waited on the kitchen counter. No texts arrived wishing me a happy birthday. By midday, I'd convinced myself I didn't care. I was an adult, after all. Birthdays were for children. Then my phone buzzed during my lunch break, and for a brief, hopeful moment, I thought someone had remembered. Instead, I received the message that would finally break the chains of obligation and guilt that had bound me to my family for 24 years. The text from my father was brief, but devastating. "We sold your car for $8,000. Jake needs tuition money. Family comes first. Be grateful we raised you right." I read it once, twice, 3 times, my brain struggling to process the words. My car, my legally owned, paid for with my own money car, had been sold without my knowledge or consent. My fingers trembled as I typed, "You did what?" The response came immediately. "Don't be dramatic. We left your things from the car on your bed. You can take the bus to work until you save up for another one." The casual cruelty of it knocked the wind out of me. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, surrounded by colleagues chatting and eating while my world imploded. My car wasn't just transportation, it was the first major step toward my independence, tangible proof that I could build a life on my terms. I excused myself to the bathroom where I pressed my forehead against the cool tile wall, trying to steady my breathing. I had patience waiting. I couldn't fall apart now. With trembling hands, I splashed water on my face and returned to the floor, somehow functioning on autopilot through medication rounds and patient assessments. During my afternoon break, I called my father, hoping against hope that this was some terrible misunderstanding. "Dad, please tell me you didn't really sell my car," I said when he answered. "Of course we did," he replied, as if discussing something as trivial as rearranging the living room furniture. "Jake's tuition is due next week, and we're short. The dealership gave us a fair price considering the mileage. But it wasn't yours to sell." My voice rose, drawing concerned looks from passing staff members. "The car is in my name. I paid for it." "You had no right." "Don't take that tone with me," he interrupted. "You're being selfish. Jake needs his education." What was I supposed to do? Let him drop out? "Family comes first, Haley. Always." "Put Mom on the phone," I demanded, hoping for some semblance of reason from her. My mother's voice was soft, but cutting when she came on the line. "Honey, if you really loved us, you wouldn't make such a fuss. Jake has his whole future ahead of him. You already have your degree and a good job. You can manage without a car for a while." Before I could respond, I heard Jake in the background, his voice carrying clearly through the phone. "Tell her to chill out. I need education more than she needs a car. She can take the bus like other people." The entitlement in his tone made my blood boil. Then Melissa chimed in, "Seriously, she should just get over it. It's not like she doesn't make good money." Hearing them discuss me as if I weren't on the phone, as if my feelings and property rights were irrelevant, crystallized something inside me. These people, my family, saw me as nothing more than a resource to be used and discarded at their convenience. "What dealership did you take it to?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Carson's on Main. My father replied. Why? It's done, Haley. Move on. I ended the call without another word and immediately phoned Carson's dealership. After explaining the situation to an increasingly uncomfortable sales manager named Paul, the truth emerged. My parents had indeed sold my car that morning, presenting the title with what appeared to be my signature. Ma'am, I have the paperwork right here, Paul said hesitantly. It has your signature on the title transfer. That's not possible, I replied. I'm at work. I haven't signed anything. A heavy silence followed before Paul cleared his throat. I think you should come down when you can, and maybe bring a police report. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had forged my signature. They had committed fraud. The car was in my name only. I had insisted on that despite my father's attempts to be added to the title, just in case. The spare key they had was meant for emergencies, not to facilitate theft. As I ended the call with Paul, my colleague Janice touched my shoulder. Haley, your patient in 304 is asking for pain medication. I nodded, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I'll be right there. Somehow, I made it through the remaining hours of my shift, attending to patients with as much care and attention as I could muster while my personal life crumbled. The unfairness of it all kept hitting me in waves, that on my birthday, of all days, my family had committed what amounted to grand theft auto against me. As I changed out of my scrubs at the end of my shift, Amy noticed my red-rimmed eyes. What happened? She asked, sitting beside me on the bench. When I explained, her expression shifted from concern to outrage. That's illegal, Haley. That's not just wrong, it's criminal. You need to report this. They're my family, I said weakly, the excuse sounding hollow even to my ears. Family doesn't steal from you, Amy replied firmly. What are you going to do about getting home? I hadn't even thought that far ahead. My car, my now-sold car, had been my transportation to and from the hospital. I can call an Uber, I began, but was interrupted by another voice. I can drive you, offered Tyler, who had just finished his paramedic shift and overheard our conversation. And I think you should call the police. I shook my head, not ready to take that step, though a part of me knew he was right. As we walked to the parking lot, the empty space where my Corolla should have been seemed to mock me, a perfect metaphor for the void where familial love and respect should exist. The ride to my parents' house was quiet, Tyler occasionally glancing at me with concern, but respecting my need for silence. When we pulled up to the curb, he put the car in park but didn't unlock the doors. You don't have to go in there, he said quietly. You can stay at my place or with Amy. Take some time to figure things out. His kindness nearly broke me, but I shook my head. I need to face them. I need to see if there's any explanation that could possibly make this okay. There wasn't. When I walked through the front door, my family was seated around the dinner table, eating as if nothing unusual had happened. My car belongings, sunglasses, phone charger, emergency kit, and the small container of personal items I kept in the glove compartment had been unceremoniously dumped on my bed, some things broken in the process. Finally home, my mother remarked without looking up from her plate. There's leftover casserole in the fridge if you're hungry. The normalcy was surreal. I stood in the doorway, staring at them, wondering how these people who shared my blood could be so callous about violating my trust and stealing my property. How could you? I finally managed to ask. My father sighed dramatically, as if I were a petulant child interrupting an important meeting. We've been through this, Haley. Jake needed the tuition money. The decision is made. Be mature about it. Mature? I repeated incredulously. You stole my car. You forged my signature. There's nothing mature about what you did. We didn't steal anything, my mother interjected. We're family. Family shares resources when needs arise. Did anyone ask if I had needs? I countered. Did anyone consider that I need transportation to get to the job that apparently funds everyone else's priorities? Jake rolled his eyes. Drama queen. Take the bus like I do. You take the bus because you crashed your car, I snapped. A car that Mom and Dad bought for you, by the way. My father's face darkened. That's enough. Under this roof, we make decisions as a family for the family. No, I corrected him. You make decisions for everyone without consultation or consent. That's not family. That's dictatorship. If you don't like how this family operates, he said coldly, there's the door. But don't expect to come crawling back when you realize how good you had it here. It was the same threat he'd used throughout my life whenever I showed any sign of independence. For the first time, however, it didn't fill me with fear. Instead, I felt something unexpected, relief. The door suddenly represented not punishment, but escape. I'll be finding my own place, I said with a calm I didn't know I possessed. And you'll be hearing from me about the car. What's that supposed to mean? My mother asked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. It means what you did was illegal, I replied. And there are consequences for illegal actions. As I turned to go to my room, my father called after me, we sacrificed everything for you, Haley. Everything. A little gratitude would be appropriate. The word gratitude echoed in my mind as I closed my bedroom door. They expected gratitude for theft, for betrayal, for years of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that what I had experienced throughout my life wasn't normal family dynamics. It was abuse. And on my 24th birthday, I received an unexpected gift, the final push I needed to break free. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in my childhood bed, surrounded by the few possessions I'd managed to accumulate despite my parents' constant financial demands, and stared at the ceiling. The familiar glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck there at age 12 seemed to mock me now, wishes and dreams pasted on a ceiling I could never actually reach. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. You okay? Been thinking about you all night. The simple kindness made my eyes well up again. I'd spent so long in an environment where my feelings were dismissed that genuine concern felt almost foreign. Not really, I replied honestly. Not sure what to do next. Her response was immediate. Whatever you need. Spare room is yours if you want it. I clutched the phone to my chest like a lifeline. Perhaps it was. The next morning, I had to face the practical reality of my situation. I needed to get to work, and my transportation was gone. The nearest bus stop was a mile away, and the route would require 2 transfers to reach the hospital. The commute would take nearly 2 hours each way. As I quietly gathered my uniform and prepared to leave extra early, my mother appeared in the kitchen doorway in her bathrobe. I've made you breakfast, she said, gesturing to a plate of pancakes on the table, my favorite, not Jake's, for once. The attempted peace offering was as transparent as it was inadequate. I don't have time, I replied, though I had intentionally given myself extra time for the bus journey. I need to leave now to catch the bus. Something like guilt flickered across her face. Your father and I were talking. We can drive you until you figure something out. The audacity nearly took my breath away. They steal my car, then offer rides as if doing me a favor. No thank you, I said stiffly. I'd rather take the bus. The walk to the bus stop gave me time to think, each step on the pavement a small act of independence. By the time I reached the hospital, sweaty, tired, and nearly late despite my early departure, I was emotionally drained. My colleague Lisa noticed immediately as we prepared for shift handover. Rough morning, she asked, helping me organize my patient charts. Rough life, I muttered, then immediately regretted the self-pity in my voice. Throughout my shift, I moved through my duties mechanically, my mind elsewhere. During lunch, Amy joined me, sliding into the cafeteria seat across from mine. You look terrible, she said bluntly. No offense. None taken, I sighed, picking at my salad without appetite. I feel terrible. Did you report the car theft yet? I shook my head. I don't know if I can do that to them. They're still my parents. Amy leaned forward, her expression serious. Haley, listen to me. If a stranger stole your car, would you report it? Of course, but no buts. What they did was theft. The fact that they're related to you makes it worse, not better. Her words resonated, but taking action against my family felt impossible. Years of conditioning had taught me that their needs always superseded mine, that questioning their authority was selfish and ungrateful. Even now, with the clear evidence of their betrayal before me, I struggled to break free from those deeply ingrained beliefs. "I'll think about it," I promised, though we both knew I was stalling. The real breakdown came at the end of my shift. In the quiet privacy of the hospital locker room, I opened my locker to find the small birthday card that Tyler had slipped inside, a simple gesture from someone who had no obligation to remember my birthday, but did anyway. The contrast between his thoughtfulness and my family's callousness was stark. I sank onto the bench, card clutched in my trembling hands, and finally allowed the tears to flow freely. Years of suppressed hurt and anger poured out in heaving sobs that I couldn't control. That's how Tyler found me when he came looking after his shift ended. Without a word, he sat beside me and put his arm around my shoulders, offering quiet support until the storm of emotion subsided. "I can't go back there," I finally whispered, voicing the decision my heart had already made. "You don't have to," he assured me. "Not tonight. Not ever if that's what you want." He drove me to Amy's apartment, where she was already preparing the spare room. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted, showing me where she'd put fresh towels and a spare key. That night, lying in Amy's guest bed, I felt simultaneously lost and found. I had no car, no concrete plan, and most of my possessions were still at my parents' house. Yet for the first time in memory, I was making choices based solely on my own needs and well-being. My phone had been buzzing periodically with texts from my mother, ranging from concerned, "Are you coming home tonight?" to manipulative, "Your father's blood pressure is up because of the stress you're causing." I silenced it without responding. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Something I'd never done before, even when legitimately ill. Janice, my supervisor, was surprisingly understanding. "Take the time you need," she said. "Your patients need you at your best." Left alone in Amy's apartment, I paced restlessly, feeling powerless despite my physical removal from my parents' house. They still had most of my belongings. They had gotten away with selling my car. They probably assumed I would eventually cave, as I always had before, and return to the fold with appropriate contrition for my selfish behavior. The familiar pattern of guilt and obligation began to creep in. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe family really did come first. Maybe I should be more understanding of their financial struggles. I was reaching for my phone to call my mother when it rang in my hand, an unknown number. "Is this Haley Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking." "This is Sarah Kingsley. We work together at Memorial. I'm the night shift charge nurse in oncology." I knew Sarah by reputation more than personal interaction since we worked different shifts. At 45, she was respected for both her clinical skills and her no-nonsense approach to workplace drama. "Amy mentioned you're going through some family difficulties," Sarah continued. "I hope you don't mind her sharing that." I experienced something similar years ago, and she thought I might have some perspective to offer. Something in her tone, understanding without pity, made me open up. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole story, from the years of financial exploitation to the car theft. Sarah listened without interruption until I finished, slightly embarrassed by my emotional download to someone I barely knew. "Haley," she said finally, her voice gentle but firm, "what you're describing isn't normal family dynamics. It's financial abuse." The word abuse hung in the air between us. I had used it in my own thoughts, but hearing someone else, someone older and wiser, confirm it gave the assessment weight and validity. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I feel trapped even though I've physically left." "That's because you haven't mentally left yet," Sarah replied. "They've conditioned you to prioritize their needs and feelings above your own. Breaking that conditioning is harder than walking out the door." "How do I break it?" I asked, desperate for a roadmap out of the emotional maze. "You recognize that you have legitimate rights," Sarah said. "You start enforcing boundaries. And sometimes, you have to be willing to take actions that they'll label as disloyal or ungrateful in order to protect yourself." "Like reporting the car theft?" I ventured. "Exactly like that," she confirmed. "They're counting on your reluctance to hold them accountable. That's how they've controlled you all these years." After we hung up, I sat at Amy's kitchen table, Sarah's words replaying in my mind. The clarity they provided was like oxygen after years of breathing in the toxic fog of manipulation. I was still scared. I was still sad. But for the first time, I was also angry. Not the helpless anger that burns inward, but the righteous anger that fuels action. And I was ready to act. The day after my conversation with Sarah became the first day of my new life. I woke early, made a pot of coffee in Amy's kitchen, and sat down with a notebook to create what I called my independence plan. First, I needed to secure my remaining possessions from my parents' house. Next, I needed affordable housing of my own. And finally, I needed transportation to get to and from work. The tasks seemed overwhelming when viewed together, but Sarah had advised me to break them down into manageable steps. Start with your support system, she had suggested. You'll be surprised how many people want to help. Taking her advice, I texted Tyler, "Can you help me get my things from my parents' house tomorrow when they're at work?" His response was immediate, "Absolutely." "What time?" Amy emerged from her bedroom as I was making my list, hair tousled from sleep. "Planning the revolution?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Something like that," I smiled weakly. "I need to find an apartment I can afford on short notice." Amy sat across from me, suddenly looking excited. "Actually, Kendra from Pediatrics just mentioned her roommate is moving out next week. Her place is only about 10 minutes from the hospital." Kendra was a pediatric nurse I knew casually from hospital functions, warm, reliable, and refreshingly drama-free. The prospect of sharing space with someone like her rather than continuing to impose on Amy was appealing. "Would she mind if I called her?" I asked. "Are you kidding? She's been struggling to find someone trustworthy. She'd probably offer you the room on the spot." By noon, I had a potential living situation. Kendra had indeed been enthusiastic, offering to show me the apartment that evening. "It's nothing fancy," she warned, "but it's clean, safe, and the rent is reasonable." My next call was more difficult. Mark Williams was a lawyer who had dated Amy briefly the previous year. Though their romantic relationship hadn't worked out, they had remained friends, and I knew he specialized in property law. "I can't afford legal fees," I admitted after explaining my situation. "Let's start with a consultation," Mark suggested. "No charge. Then we'll figure out your options." Meeting with Mark that afternoon in his modest office downtown, I learned several important things. First, what my parents had done was unequivocally illegal, both the theft of the car and the forgery of my signature. Second, I had several potential courses of action, ranging from a civil suit to criminal charges. And third, I needed to document everything. "Start keeping records of all communications with your parents," Mark advised. "Texts, emails, voicemails, preserve them all. And don't delete anything they've already sent, especially any admissions about taking the car." As I left his office with a folder of information, I felt a strange sense of calm. Knowledge was power, and for once, I wasn't operating from a place of emotional reaction, but informed decision-making. That evening, Kendra showed me her apartment, a 2-bedroom unit in an older but well-maintained building. The available room was small, but had good natural light and built-in shelves. The shared spaces were tidy and comfortable. "I work a lot of evenings, so we probably won't overlap too much," Kendra explained. "House rules are pretty simple: clean up after yourself, no loud music after 10, and contribute to the snack drawer." She pointed to a kitchen drawer filled with an impressive variety of chips, cookies, and chocolate bars. "The snack drawer is non-negotiable," she added with mock seriousness. I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in days. I can definitely contribute to the snack drawer. By the time I returned to Amy's apartment, I had signed a rental agreement with Kendra, starting the following week. The security deposit had taken a chunk of my savings, but it was worth the peace of mind. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang, my parents' number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered, putting the call on speaker and recording it as Mark had advised. "Haley," my father's voice was artificially warm. "When are you coming home? Your mother is worried sick." "I'm not coming home," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I've found my own place." A brief silence followed before his tone changed, becoming cold and dismissive. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't afford your own place. Come home, and we'll forget this childish tantrum." "It's not a tantrum, Dad. You stole my car. You forged my signature. Those are crimes." We did what was necessary for this family, he insisted. If you're going to be technical about it, technical? I interrupted. There's nothing technical about grand theft auto and forgery. My mother's voice broke in, likely on another extension. Haley, please. We're your parents. We've given you everything. You owe us. I don't owe you the right to steal from me, I stated firmly. I'm an adult. My property is mine, not yours. So what are you saying? My father's voice had taken on the dangerous quiet that had intimidated me throughout childhood. Are you threatening us? Your own parents. I'm informing you that I'll be coming tomorrow at 2 o'clock to collect my belongings. Tyler will be with me. I expect no interference. If you walk out like this, my father warned, don't expect any support from us ever again. The threat that had kept me compliant for years now seemed almost laughable. What support had they ever truly provided that didn't come with strings attached? I understand, I replied. Goodbye. After ending the call, I sat on the edge of the bed, adrenaline coursing through me. I had stood my ground. I had set a boundary. And while the earth hadn't opened up to swallow me whole, as my anxiety had always suggested it might, I knew the real test would come tomorrow. That night, I created a group chat with Tyler, Amy, Sarah, and Kendra, explaining my plan to retrieve my belongings the next day. Their responses flooded in immediately. Tyler, I'll be there. My truck can fit whatever you need. Amy, I'll come too. Safety in numbers. Sarah, I'm off tomorrow. Need another pair of hands. Kendra, I can help you move stuff to my place right after. Staring at the screen, I felt a lump form in my throat. This was what genuine support looked like. People offering help without expecting anything in return. The following morning, I called the police non-emergency line to request a civil standby, an officer to be present while I retrieved my belongings to prevent potential conflict. The dispatcher, after hearing my situation, assured me someone would meet us at the house. As I prepared for the confrontation, Sarah's words echoed in my mind. They've conditioned you to prioritize their needs and feelings above your own. Breaking that conditioning is harder than walking out the door. She was right. Even now, knowing all I knew, a part of me still feared hurting my parents' feelings, still worried about being labeled ungrateful or selfish. But alongside that conditioned response, a new voice was emerging, my own voice, insisting on my right to respect, autonomy, and basic fairness. By the time Tyler picked me up in his truck, with Amy and Sarah following in Sarah's car, I had transformed my fear into determination. This wasn't just about retrieving clothes and personal items. It was about reclaiming my life. The day I reclaimed my independence began with meticulous preparation. Tyler arrived at Amy's apartment at 1 o'clock, his pickup truck emptied of work equipment to make room for my belongings. Sarah pulled up moments later with Amy, who had taken a rare day off to support me. Ready for this? Tyler asked as I climbed into the passenger seat of his truck. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, clutching a folder containing the document Mark had prepared. A formal demand for compensation for my stolen vehicle. The drive to my parents' house felt surreal, as if I were approaching a place I had only visited in dreams rather than the home where I had spent most of my life. Officer Ramirez, who had been assigned to our civil standby, was already waiting when we arrived, his patrol car parked conspicuously at the curb. Ms. Mitchell, he confirmed as we approached. I understand you're retrieving your personal property today. Any reason to believe this won't go smoothly? My parents don't respond well to boundaries, I explained, the understatement of the year. But having you here should help. To my surprise, the house appeared empty when we arrived. No cars in the driveway, no movement visible through the windows. Using my key, I led our small group inside, half expecting to find my room emptied or my possessions damaged out of spite. Instead, everything was untouched. My clothing still in the dresser, books on the shelves, nursing textbooks stacked on the desk. The normality was almost disappointing, as if the dramatic confrontation I had steeled myself for had been canceled without notice. Let's work quickly, Sarah suggested, ever practical. Start with the essentials and things of sentimental value. We formed an efficient assembly line, me selecting and packing, Amy and Sarah carrying boxes to the door, Tyler loading them into the truck. Within an hour, we had packed most of my clothing, all my professional materials, my laptop and electronics, and the few keepsakes I couldn't bear to leave behind: photo albums, my grandmother's jewelry box, the quilt my aunt had made for my high school graduation. As we worked on the final boxes, the front door opened. My mother entered first, stopping short at the sight of strangers in her house and a police officer standing calmly in the living room. My father followed, his expression darkening instantly. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, ignoring Officer Ramirez and addressing me directly. "Who are these people? Why is there a police officer in my house?" "I told you I was coming for my things," I replied, continuing to fold a sweater into a box. "These are my friends, helping me move." "You didn't say anything about police," my mother interjected, her voice trembling with either fear or rage. It was sometimes hard to tell the difference. "Officer Ramirez is here to ensure this goes smoothly," I explained. "We're almost finished." My father stepped forward, only to be intercepted by Officer Ramirez. "Sir, I'm here to keep the peace while your daughter retrieves her personal belongings. I suggest you let her complete this process without interference." The official tone seemed to momentarily deflate my father's bluster. He retreated to the kitchen, my mother trailing behind him, whispered arguments floating back to us as we continued working. When the last box was loaded, I took a deep breath and approached the kitchen, the folder from Mark clutched firmly in my hand. Tyler positioned himself discreetly in the doorway, a silent support. "I'm leaving now," I announced. "But before I go, I want to address the matter of my car." My father scoffed. "There's nothing to address. The decision is made." "You had no legal right to sell my vehicle," I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "It was registered in my name only. You forged my signature, which is a felony offense." "We are your parents," my mother hissed, her earlier trembling replaced by indignation. "Everything we've done has been for this family." "Selling my car without permission wasn't for me," I countered. "It was for Jake, who has never been expected to support himself the way I've had to." As if summoned by his name, my brother appeared in the doorway behind Tyler, looking confused and annoyed. "What's going on? Why are there people taking your stuff?" "I'm moving out," I told him simply. "And I'm addressing the fact that Mom and Dad illegally sold my car to pay for your tuition." Jake's expression shifted from confusion to defensive anger. "They said you agreed to help. Don't blame me because you changed your mind." "I never agreed to anything," I replied. "They stole my car, Jake. They committed fraud." "That's ridiculous," my father interjected. "We're your parents. We don't steal from you." "This document says otherwise," I said, removing the demand letter from the folder and placing it on the kitchen counter. "My lawyer has prepared this formal demand for compensation for the full value of my vehicle, $12,000, not the $8,000 you accepted. You have 30 days to pay in full, or I will be pursuing both civil and criminal charges." The silence that followed was absolute. My father stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake, while my mother's face drained of color. "You wouldn't dare," my father finally whispered. "I would prefer not to," I acknowledged. "I'd prefer that you simply acknowledge what you did was wrong and make restitution. But I will pursue legal action if necessary." "After everything we've done for you," my mother began, tears welling in her eyes. Her standard tactic when logical arguments failed. "How can you threaten us like this? We raised you, fed you, clothed you. That was your obligation as parents," I interrupted, a statement that would have been unthinkable for me to make even days earlier. "It doesn't give you the right to steal from me as an adult." My father's face contorted with rage. "Get out of my house," he snarled. "Get out now before I forget you're my daughter." "Frank," my mother gasped, but he continued. "If you pursue this, you are no longer part of this family. Do you understand? You will be dead to us." The threat hung in the air between us. In the past, it would have devastated me, sent me backpedaling with apologies and concessions. Now, it simply confirmed what I already knew. Their love had always been conditional on my compliance. "I understand," I said quietly. "The choice is yours. Pay what you owe for my stolen property, or face the consequences." As I turned to leave, Melissa appeared in the hallway, clearly having overheard everything. Unlike the others, her expression wasn't angry but thoughtful, almost sad. "Haley," she called as I reached the front door. "Wait." She hurried to her room and returned with something clutched in her hand, my childhood teddy bear, worn with age and love, that I had overlooked in my packing. "You should take him," she said, pressing the stuffed animal into my hands. "And I'm sorry about your car. I didn't know they didn't ask you." The simple gesture of kindness from the sibling I'd least expected it from brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Mel," I whispered, giving her a quick hug before walking out the door. Outside, my friends waited by the vehicles, faces concerned. "Everything okay?" Amy asked. "No," I admitted, "but it will be." As we drove away, I watched my childhood home recede in the side mirror, the distance growing with each passing second. My father had appeared on the front step, still shouting something I could no longer hear. My mother stood beside him, one hand covering her face. Neither Melissa nor Jake was visible. "You did it," Tyler said beside me, his voice filled with quiet pride. "You stood your ground." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The confrontation had been every bit as difficult as I'd feared, but also strangely liberating. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth without minimizing it to protect others' feelings. I had named the injustice without accepting blame for noticing it. The threats and emotional manipulation hadn't vanished, but their power over me had. And that made all the difference. The week following my departure from my parents' house passed in a blur of activity. With Kendra's help, I settled into my new room, arranging my belongings in the limited space with a sense of ownership I'd never experienced before. Every item I placed, each book on the shelf, each photo I tacked to the wall, represented a choice that was entirely mine. "It's really coming together," Kendra remarked on the third evening as she leaned against the doorframe, watching me organize my small desk. "How does it feel?" "Strange," I admitted. "Good strange, but still strange. I keep expecting someone to tell me I've put something in the wrong place." She nodded, understanding. "Independence takes some getting used to. Wait until you have to unclog your first drain without calling a parent. That's when you know you've truly adult." Her easy humor had already become one of my favorite things about living with her. Unlike the walking on eggshells atmosphere of my parents' house, our apartment was filled with laughter and straightforward communication. The practical challenges of my new independence were substantial but manageable. Without a car, my commute to the hospital required careful planning and occasional ride-sharing with colleagues heading in the same direction. My budget, already tight, now had to accommodate rent and transportation costs I hadn't anticipated. Yet these limitations felt different from the financial constraints I'd experienced while living at home. These were my challenges, faced on my terms, without the constant drain of supporting others' priorities. 1 week after delivering the demand letter, I received my first communication from my parents, a formal letter from their attorney rejecting my claim for compensation. "They've hired Gerald Winston," Mark informed me when I brought him the letter. "He's known for aggressive tactics." "What does that mean for my case?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my voice. "It means they're taking this seriously," he replied, "which actually works in our favor. They wouldn't hire Winston if they didn't believe they were legally vulnerable." Over the following days, the legal process unfolded alongside my new life. I filed a police report documenting the car theft and forgery, providing the officer with text messages in which my father explicitly admitted selling my car without permission. Carson's dealership cooperated fully, providing copies of the sales documents with the forged signature. "We have a solid case," Mark assured me. "The evidence is clear. The question is how far you want to push this." It was a question I wrestled with daily. Despite everything, these were still my parents. The thought of them facing criminal charges created a knot of conflicting emotions that kept me awake at night. "They're counting on that hesitation," Sarah pointed out during one of our regular coffee meetings. "They've trained you to protect them, even at your own expense." She was right, of course. The conditioning ran deep, making it difficult to separate legitimate compassion from unhealthy guilt. In the end, My decision came not from anger, but from clarity. My parents needed to experience consequences to understand that their behavior was unacceptable. 2 weeks after moving out, I filed formal charges of grand theft auto and forgery. The detective assigned to my case, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Sawyer, took my statement with professional detachment. Family cases are always complicated, she acknowledged. But the law is clear. You can't sell someone else's vehicle without their consent, regardless of your relationship to them. The fallout was swift and dramatic. My parents received formal notices to appear for questioning. Extended family members began taking sides, most supporting my parents based on their carefully crafted narrative of an ungrateful daughter, but a few reaching out to offer support after hearing my version of events. My Aunt Catherine, my mother's older sister, called me out of the blue one evening. "I always wondered when you'd finally stand up to them," she said without preamble. "Your mother has been calling everyone in the family, telling them you've lost your mind. But I've watched how they've treated you for years." Her validation brought tears to my eyes. "I thought I was crazy sometimes," I admitted. "The way they made everything seem normal. There's nothing normal about expecting your adult daughter to finance the family while taking away her independence," Aunt Catherine stated firmly. "I'm proud of you, Haley. It takes courage to break patterns like this." Not all reactions were as supportive. My Uncle Robert left a scathing voicemail accusing me of destroying the family over a car. Several cousins unfriended me on social media. Even my grandmother, usually a neutral party in family disputes, expressed disappointment in my decision to involve outsiders in what she considered private family matters. The most unexpected development came from Melissa. 3 weeks after I moved out, she texted asking if we could meet for coffee. Wary but hopeful, I agreed. We met at a cafe halfway between her school and my apartment. At 18, my sister still carried the round-cheeked softness of adolescence, but her eyes held a new awareness as she stirred her latte. "It's weird at home now," she began. "Dad's angry all the time. Mom cries a lot. Jake just stays in his room playing video games." "I'm sorry it's difficult," I said, meaning it. She shook her head. "That's not why I wanted to talk. I wanted to tell you that I get it now. What you were saying about them treating you differently. What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious. "After you left, they started expecting me to take over your role," she explained. "Suddenly, I'm supposed to work part-time to contribute to the family while maintaining perfect grades. Dad took control of my savings account for safekeeping. It's like they just transferred all their expectations from you to me." The realization that my parents hadn't learned from my departure, but had simply found a new target made my stomach churn. "Mel, that's not right. Your money is yours. You need to protect it." "I know that now," she said, a determined set to her jaw that reminded me of my own recent awakening. "I've been talking to Aunt Catherine about opening a new account they can't access." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's really smart, Mel. And if you need any help, would you really help me?" She interrupted. "Even after everything?" "Of course," I assured her. "You're my sister. What happened with Mom and Dad doesn't change that." Tears welled in her eyes. "Jake says we should hate you for what you're doing to the family. But I think you might be saving me from going through what you did." We parted with a tight hug and a promise to stay in touch regardless of what happened with our parents. That connection, honest, equal, and free from manipulation, felt like the first healthy family relationship I had ever experienced. Meanwhile, the consequences of my legal action continued to unfold. Detective Sawyer informed me that the district attorney had decided to pursue the forgery charges, but was willing to negotiate on the theft charge if restitution was made. "Your parents are facing serious consequences," Mark explained during our next meeting. "Forgery carries potential jail time. They're motivated to settle." Sure enough, a settlement offer arrived through their attorney the following week, $10,000 in compensation for the car, with the stipulation that I drop all criminal charges. "What do you think?" I asked Mark after reviewing the offer. "It's less than the full value, but more than they got from selling it," he replied. "From a practical standpoint, it would resolve this faster than going to court. But it's your decision, Haley. What outcome are you looking for here?" I considered the question carefully. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Or simply acknowledgement that what they had done was wrong? I want them to understand they can't treat people this way, I said finally. But I don't necessarily want them to go to jail. After further negotiation, we reached an agreement. Full restitution of $12,000, a formal written apology acknowledging the wrongdoing, and my parents' agreement to attend financial boundaries counseling. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges. The check arrived by certified mail 3 days later, accompanied by a terse letter of apology that clearly had been drafted by their attorney and reluctantly signed by my parents. It wasn't the heartfelt reconciliation part of me had secretly hoped for, but it was accountability, perhaps the first real accountability they had ever faced. With the settlement money, I purchased a used Honda Civic. Less expensive than my previous car, allowing me to keep some funds in savings. The day I drove it off the lot, registration and insurance in my name only, I felt a profound sense of reclaiming what had been taken from me, not just transportation, but agency over my own life. My professional life flourished amid these personal changes. Freed from the constant financial drain of supporting my family, I could focus fully on my nursing career. When a senior position opened in the emergency department, Janice encouraged me to apply despite my relatively limited experience. "You've shown exceptional judgment and composure under pressure," she noted during my interview. "Recent events in your personal life have demonstrated that clearly." I got the position, which came with a substantial pay increase and more regular hours. The irony wasn't lost on me. By prioritizing my own well-being for once, I had actually improved my professional prospects rather than undermining them as my parents had always implied would happen if I selfishly focused on my own needs. 3 months after moving out of my parents' house, I sat in my new car in the hospital parking lot after finishing my shift, reflecting on the transformation of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, who had been a steadfast support throughout the ordeal. "Dinner tonight to celebrate 3 months of freedom?" I smiled as I typed my reply, "Absolutely. My treat this time." As I drove toward the restaurant, I realized that the settlement money and promotion were only the tangible results of my stand for independence. The true victory was internal, learning to value my own needs, to set and maintain boundaries, and to recognize that genuine love doesn't demand sacrifice of one's basic rights and dignity. My car radio played softly as I navigated the familiar streets, no longer feeling like an imposter in my own life. The road ahead was uncharted, but undeniably mine.